What if I told you that the world's first superhero story wasn't written in the 20th century, but over 4,000 years ago? It's a story about a king who was two-thirds god, who battled monsters and took on the heavens themselves. But this ancient epic isn't really about fame or glory. It's about a question that still gets to us today. What do we do when we lose someone we love? And how do we deal with the terrifying fact that one day we will also die? The answer is buried in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is the story of a man who saw the deep, who knew everything that could be known, and who came back, exhausted from his long journey, to carve his entire story on his stone tablets. His name was Gilgamesh. Picture this: Mesopotamia, the grand city of Uruk, with its massive temples and walls so strong they seemed impenetrable. Its king, Gilgamesh, was a living legend. He was two-thirds god and one-third man, gifted with beauty by the sun god and courage by the storm god. No one could match his strength. But all that power went to his head. Gilgamesh was a tyrant. He ruled with an iron fist, convinced that everyone and everything was his to command. He worked his people to exhaustion on his building projects, would fight any man just to prove he could, and even asserted a right to sleep with every bride on her wedding night. The people of Uruk were suffering, and in their despair, they cried out to the gods for help, and the gods listened. The great god Anu told the goddess of creation, Uruk, to make a rival for Gilgamesh, someone who could finally match his strength and knock some of the arrogance out of him. So, Uruk took some clay, and out in the wild, she sculpted Enkidu. Enkidu was Gilgamesh's total opposite. He wasn't a man of the city. He was a child of nature. He was covered in hair and lived among the animals, running with the gazelles and drinking from their watering holes. He knew nothing about civilization, only the raw freedom of the wild. A local trapper discovered Enkidu after finding his traps repeatedly destroyed. Terrified of this wild man, the trapper ran to King Gilgamesh, who came up with a plan that relied on seduction, not strength. He sent a temple courtesan named Shamhat to meet Enkidu. In Mesopotamian culture, human connection and sexuality were seen as powerful civilizing forces. Shamhat waited by the watering hole, and when Enkidu appeared, she met him. They were together for 6 days and 7 nights, and this profound human contact completely changed him. When he went back to his animal friends, they ran from him. He had lost his place in the wild, but he had gained something new: human consciousness and wisdom. Shamhat taught Enkidu how to wear clothes, eat bread, and drink ale, the basics of civilized life. She told him all about the mighty city of Uruk and its powerful king. But when she mentioned Gilgamesh's tyrannical behavior, especially his claim on new brides, Enkidu was filled with a righteous anger. He knew he had to go to Uruk and challenge this king. The stage was set for an epic showdown. As Gilgamesh marched to a wedding chamber, he found his way blocked by the massive figure of Enkidu. The two titans clashed right there in the streets, wrestling with so much force the city itself seemed to tremble. It was a battle of equals. In the end, Gilgamesh managed to throw Enkidu with a final burst of strength. But instead of anger, there was a sudden, mutual respect. In that moment of exhaustion, a powerful friendship was born. Gilgamesh, the king who'd never met his match, had found a true equal. And Enkidu, the wild man who'd never had a home, had found a brother. They embraced, and from that day on, they were inseparable. This friendship is the first major turning point of the story. It brings together two halves of a whole: Gilgamesh, representing the city and civilization, and Enkidu, representing the wild world of nature. Together, they were complete, and their partnership was about to change both of their lives forever. With their friendship sealed, Gilgamesh wasn't satisfied just being a king anymore. He craved a legacy, a name that would be remembered for all time. He proposed a huge adventure, a trip to the forbidden cedar forest to kill its demonic guardian, Humbaba. Humbaba was a monster put there by the gods to protect the sacred trees. Enkidu, who knew the forest from his wild days, was terrified and begged his friend not to go, but Gilgamesh was determined. After having giant weapons made and getting a blessing from Gilgamesh's mother, the goddess Ninsun, the two heroes set off. The journey was filled with danger. Gilgamesh had a series of awful nightmares, but each time, Enkidu cleverly interpreted them as good omens to keep his friends' spirits up. When they finally reached the cedar forest and faced Humbaba, a ferocious battle began. With the help of the sun god Shamash, who sent 13 powerful winds to trap the monster, they managed to corner him. Humbaba begged for his life, but Enkidu, sensing a trick, told Gilgamesh to show no mercy. They killed the demon, but as he died, Humbaba cursed Enkidu, vowing he wouldn't live a long life. The heroes ignored the curse, chopped down the sacred cedar trees, and returned to Uruk as triumphant heroes, carrying the monster's head as a trophy. Their fame even reached the heavens. Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, was completely smitten with Gilgamesh. She came down to Uruk and proposed marriage, offering him unimaginable riches and power. But Gilgamesh, in an incredible act of arrogance, didn't just say no. He brutally insulted her, listing all of her past mortal lovers and the terrible fates they all suffered. Humiliated and furious, Ishtar stormed back to the heavens and demanded her father, Anu, unleash the bull of heaven to punish Uruk. Anu reluctantly agreed, and the gigantic beast descended, its snorts opening up huge chasms in the earth that swallowed hundreds of people. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood together once more. In an amazing display of teamwork, they fought and killed the bull of heaven. Then, to add the ultimate insult, Enkidu ripped off one of the bull's legs and threw it in Ishtar's face. That was the last straw. They had killed two beings favored by the gods and had directly disrespected a goddess. The gods held a meeting and made a decision. Gilgamesh, being part divine, was protected, but Enkidu was not. For their crimes, one of them had to die. They chose Enkidu. Soon after, Enkidu became deathly ill. He had nightmares of being dragged down to the underworld, the grim House of Dust. He cursed the trapper and Shamhat for bringing him into the civilized world only to die. But the sun god Shamash reminded him that without them, he never would have known the joy of friendship with Gilgamesh. Enkidu calmed down and accepted his fate. After 12 days of suffering, with Gilgamesh weeping by his side, Enkidu died. Enkidu's death is the heart of the epic. It completely shattered Gilgamesh. For 7 days and nights, he refused to let his friend be buried, desperately hoping he might just get up. He only accepted that Enkidu was gone forever when a maggot fell from his nose. This wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was Gilgamesh's first, brutal encounter with the reality of death. He looked at his own body, and for the first time, the mighty king was gripped by a new and overwhelming terror, the fear of his own death. Broken by grief and fear, Gilgamesh was a new man. He cast aside his throne and his fine clothes, dressing himself in filthy animal skins and letting his hair grow wild. He was no longer a king but a desperate wanderer, roaming the wilderness, weeping for Enkidu and for himself. He now had a single, obsessive purpose: find a way to escape death. He decided to find the only man known to have been granted eternal life, Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood. Utnapishtim and his wife lived at the very edge of the world, a place no mortal had ever reached. Gilgamesh's journey was agonizing. He crossed deadly mountains, and at the edge of the world, he found the twin peaks of Mount Mashu, which guarded the sun's path. Two terrifying scorpion beings blocked his way, but seeing his desperation and divine heritage, they let him pass through a tunnel of total darkness. After a terrifying run through the dark, Gilgamesh emerged into a magical garden of jewels at the edge of the sea. There, he met a tavern keeper named Siduri. Alarmed by his ragged appearance, she listened to his story and then tried to talk him out of his quest, telling him it was hopeless. She said, "The life that you are seeking, you will never find. When the gods created man, they allotted him death, but life they retained in their own keeping. So, Gilgamesh, let your belly be full, make merry day and night, cherish the little child holding your hand, and make your wife happy in your embrace. For this, too, is the lot of man." But Gilgamesh refused to listen. Seeing his resolve, Siduri sent him to Urshanabi, the ferryman who could guide him across the waters of death to Utnapishtim. After a difficult journey, Gilgamesh finally stood before the immortal man, but was shocked to see he was just an ordinary old man. Gilgamesh demanded to know how he had cheated death. Utnapishtim then told him the great secret of the gods, the story of the Great Flood. Long ago, he said, the gods decided to wipe out humanity because their noise was keeping the gods from sleeping. But the god of wisdom, Ye, warned Utnapishtim in a dream, telling him to build a giant boat and fill it with his family and the seed of every living thing. A terrible storm raged for 7 days, turning all of humanity to clay. When the waters finally went down, the gods regretted what they had done. As a unique reward, the god Enlil granted Utnapishtim and his wife eternal life. The story was a devastating blow. Utnapishtim's immortality wasn't earned. It was a one-time gift that would never be repeated. To prove how unfit for immortality Gilgamesh was, Utnapishtim gave him a simple test. Try to conquer sleep, death's little cousin, by staying awake for 6 days and 7 nights. But Gilgamesh, worn out from his journey, immediately fell into a deep sleep. To mark each day, Utnapishtim's wife baked a loaf of bread. When Gilgamesh woke up a week later and saw 7 loaves of bread in different stages of decay, he couldn't deny it. He couldn't even conquer sleep. How could he ever hope to conquer death? Defeated, Gilgamesh prepared to go home. But as he was leaving, Utnapishtim's wife convinced her husband to reveal one last secret, a plant at the bottom of the sea that could restore youth. Hope surged in Gilgamesh again. He tied stones to his feet, dove to the bottom of the ocean, and grabbed the thorny plant. His plan was to take it back to Uruk, test it on an old man, and then use it himself. But fate had one more cruel lesson to teach. On the way home, Gilgamesh stopped to bathe in a cool spring, leaving the precious plant on the shore. A snake, drawn by the plant's scent, slithered out, ate the plant, and immediately shed its skin, reborn. Gilgamesh could only watch, helpless, as his last hope for eternal life disappeared. He sat down and wept, the full weight of his own mortality finally crashing down on him. His quest was over. He had nothing. The Epic of Gilgamesh explores some of the deepest questions about being human, friendship, loss, and the search for meaning. And the fact that we're still wrestling with them 4,000 years later is incredible, isn't it? If you find these ancient stories as fascinating as we do, please like this video and subscribe for more journeys into mythology and history. Let us know in the comments what other myths or epics you'd like to see us explore. Empty-handed, Gilgamesh finally returned home to his great city of Uruk. He walked with Uruk, the ferryman, up to the massive walls he had once forced his people to build. He looked at the strong foundations and the perfectly fired bricks, and he saw the city bustling with life. And in that moment, something inside him clicked. He had failed to find eternal life for himself. But as he looked at the magnificent city he had built, he had a profound realization. He turned to the ferryman and said, "Climb upon the wall of Uruk, walk along it. Regard the foundation terrace and examine the masonry. Is not its masonry of kiln-fired brick? And did not the 7 sages themselves lay out its plans?" In that moment, Gilgamesh finally understood. A person can't live forever, but our creations, our communities, and the legacy we leave behind for others, that is a kind of immortality. His arrogance was replaced with a quiet wisdom. He had looked for eternal life in a magical plant, but he found it in the enduring walls of his city and in the story he would leave behind. He began his journey as a cruel tyrant, became a grieving friend, and returned a wise king. He learned that you don't conquer death by escaping it. You conquer it by living a life worth remembering. The Epic of Gilgamesh is more than just the world's oldest story. It's a foundational text of human civilization. It's the first great masterpiece of world literature, predating Homer's epics by about 1,500 years. Its themes of friendship, loss, and the search for meaning are as powerful today as they were 4 millennia ago. It shows us that while we all must face our own mortality, the true measure of a life is found in the love we share and the legacy we build. And that is a story worth telling for all time.